The cafe was quiet that morning. Soft jazz played through ceiling speakers. Cups clinked gently against saucers. Outside, the city moved in its usual rush. Horns in the distance, footsteps on pavement, conversations floating through the air. Inside, seated near the window, was a tall woman in a simple hoodie and leggings. No makeup, hair tied back, head slightly lowered as she stirred her tea. It was Serena Williams, but no one seemed to recognize her. She wasn't dressed like a superstar. No entourage, no flashing cameras. Just a mother enjoying a quiet morning alone. Or at least trying to. A young barista accidentally bumped her elbow while passing. The tea tipped. It spilled across the wooden table and splashed lightly onto the floor. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry," the barista gasped. Serena stood up calmly. "It's okay. Accidents happen." Her voice was soft, controlled, but someone else noticed. At a nearby table sat an off-duty police officer in full uniform. He had already been watching her. He stood up sharply. "Ma'am," he said loudly, drawing attention, "you need to be more careful. You just made a mess." The cafe fell quiet. Serena blinked once. It was an accident. The barista tried to speak. "Sir, it was actually." He cut her off. "Doesn't matter. You're responsible for your space." People were now staring. Phones slowly lifted. Serena felt the familiar weight of eyes on her, a pressure she had known since she was a teenager stepping onto professional courts. But this was different. This wasn't competition. This was humiliation. The officer stepped closer. "You people think rules don't apply to you," he muttered. The words hung heavy. Serena's posture straightened. "You people?" she asked calmly. He crossed his arms. "If you can't afford to act responsibly in public, maybe you shouldn't be here." Gasps rippled through the cafe. The barista looked horrified. Serena could feel her pulse rising, not out of fear, but from something deeper. She had been here before. Not this exact cafe, but this exact moment. Years ago on tennis courts. Years ago under stadium lights. Years ago when officials questioned her voice instead of her opponents. She inhaled slowly. "I paid for my tea," she said evenly. "And I didn't spill it on purpose." The officer scoffed. "Excuses." An older man near the counter squinted. "Wait," he whispered to his wife. "That's—" His wife's eyes widened. "Oh my goodness." The officer continued, unaware. "Some people need to learn humility." The irony was sharp. Serena tilted her head slightly. "Do you know who I am?" she asked, not arrogantly, but firmly. He laughed. "No. And it doesn't matter." "It does," the older woman said from behind him. He turned. "That's Serena Williams." Silence. The name traveled through the room like electricity. The officer blinked. "Serena who?" "The greatest tennis player of all time," someone added. Another voice. "She has 23 Grand Slam titles." The officer's face shifted. Still defensive. Still stiff. Serena did not smile. She did not smirk. She simply stood there. This wasn't the first time authority had misunderstood her composure. Years earlier, at the U.S. Open, controversy had exploded over a dispute with an umpire. Her passion was labeled aggression. Her strength was labeled attitude. Her confidence was labeled something else entirely. But she kept winning, kept rising, kept rewriting history. The officer cleared his throat. "Well, that doesn't change what happened here." Serena met his eyes. "No," she agreed. "It doesn't." Her response surprised him. She wasn't attacking. She wasn't raising her voice. She wasn't using her fame as a weapon. She was standing in dignity. The cafe manager rushed over. "Ms. Williams, I am so sorry." Serena shook her head. "You have nothing to apologize for." She looked back at the officer. "You wear a badge," she said gently. "That means people trust you." His jaw tightened. "Are you saying I broke the law?" "No," she said. "I'm saying you broke respect." The words landed heavier than any accusation. Phones were now recording openly. Someone whispered, "This is going viral." But Serena wasn't interested in humiliation. She was interested in growth. "You judged me," she continued. "Not because of what happened, but because of who you assumed I was." The officer's breathing slowed. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. He looked around. At the phones. At the customers. At the spilled tea being quietly cleaned by the barista he had ignored. He realized something. The loudest person in the room had been him. The calmest had been her. He began, then stopped. Serena waited. She had learned patience through championship tiebreakers. Through injuries. Through motherhood. Through criticism. Silence stretched. Finally, "I apologize," he said quietly. The cafe heard it. But more importantly, he meant it. Serena nodded once. "Thank you." No speech. No grandstanding. Just accountability. Within hours, clips from the cafe circulated online. Headlines spread fast. Officer confronts woman, regrets it instantly. But Serena never posted about it. She didn't need to. Her legacy wasn't built on viral moments. It was built on discipline, on endurance, on rewriting narratives. She finished her replacement tea, left a generous tip, and walked out calmly into the sunlight. Later that evening, the officer sat alone in his car. He replayed the moment, not the part where he raised his voice, but the part where she didn't. He thought about authority, about ego, about assumption. He had seen a woman in casual clothes and decided she was careless. He had spoken without listening, and he had been corrected, not by force, but by grace. The lesson stung, but it mattered. Serena's strength was never just about forehands and backhands. It was about composure under fire. It was about standing tall when misunderstood. It was about knowing your worth without shouting it. That morning in the cafe wasn't a championship match, but it was still a victory, not over an opponent, but over escalation, over pride, over disrespect. But the story didn't end there. Because humiliation doesn't just disappear after an apology. It lingers. It echoes. And sometimes it teaches. The cafe incident could have faded into the endless scroll of social media drama. Another viral clip. Another outrage cycle. But this one felt different. Not because it involved Serena Williams, but because of how she handled it. By the next morning, sports blogs, talk shows, and commentators were debating not the officer's words, but Serena's restraint. "How does someone stay that calm?" one host asked on a morning segment. Another replied, "That's championship mentality." Clips of her greatest comebacks began resurfacing online. Match points saved. Setbacks reversed. Moments where pressure could have broken her, but didn't. People began connecting the dots. The cafe wasn't an isolated moment. It was a reflection of who she had always been. Meanwhile, the officer woke up to dozens of missed calls. Colleagues, supervisors, friends, even family members. His teenage daughter had texted, "Dad, please tell me that's not you." He stared at the screen. He hadn't expected it to spread so fast. He hadn't expected his tone to sound so harsh when replayed. And he certainly hadn't expected to become the example in someone else's lesson. At the station, his captain called him into the office. "We're not here to crucify you," the captain said. "But perception matters. Authority requires judgment. Calm judgment." The officer nodded silently. He had thought he was maintaining order. But now he understood something uncomfortable. There had been no disorder. Only assumption. That evening, Serena sat at home scrolling through her phone. She rarely read comments. Years in professional sports had taught her how cruel strangers could be. But this time she paused. One comment stood out. She didn't fight back. She elevated. Another read. "This is why she's more than a champion." Serena exhaled softly. She wasn't trying to teach anyone anything in that cafe. She was simply tired of reacting to disrespect with anger. She had learned that anger often feeds the very thing you're trying to defeat. And she had already spent decades proving herself. She didn't need another match. Not there. Not like that. 2 days later, something unexpected happened. The police department publicly invited Serena to speak at a community outreach forum. Not for damage control, but for dialogue. The officer himself had requested it. He stood at the podium first. "I acted from assumption," he admitted. "An assumption can damage trust." The room was quiet. Then Serena took the stage. She didn't mention the spill. She didn't mention the words, "you people." Instead, she spoke about pressure. "Sometimes," she said, "we react to what we think we see instead of what is actually happening." She paused. "I've been misjudged on courts, in interviews, in life, and I've learned that power isn't about volume. It's about control." The audience listened closely. "When you hold authority," she continued, "you hold influence. And influence should protect dignity, not test it." Even the officer looked moved. After the event, the officer approached her quietly. "No cameras," he said. "Just, thank you for not tearing me apart." Serena gave a small smile. "I've been torn apart enough in my career," she replied. "It doesn't solve anything." He hesitated. "I judged you." "Yes," she said honestly. "And you forgave me." She looked at him carefully. "I accepted your apology. Forgiveness is ongoing." That answer stayed with him long after she left. The world often measures strength in noise, in dominance, in winning loudly. But Serena had redefined it over the years. At tournaments like Wimbledon, she faced crowds that sometimes cheered against her. She faced headlines that questioned her body, her emotions, her voice. She kept winning anyway, not because she needed validation, but because excellence was her language. And that excellence extended beyond tennis. Weeks later, something small but meaningful shifted. At another cafe, a frustrated customer accidentally knocked over a drink. The officer, on duty this time, stepped forward. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse. He handed the person napkins and said calmly, "It happens. Let's clean it up." His partner noticed. "Different approach," she said. He nodded. "Better one. Growth doesn't trend online. It doesn't go viral. But it matters." Months later, during an interview, Serena was asked about handling pressure outside of tennis. She didn't name the cafe. She didn't mention the officer. She simply said, "People will project their assumptions onto you. You can't control that. You can only control your response." The interviewer asked, "And what if the disrespect is loud?" Serena smiled slightly. "Then your dignity must be louder." In sports, victories are counted in trophies, grand slams, championships, records. But life counts differently. That day in the cafe, there was no scoreboard, no umpire, no roaring crowd, just spilled tea and rising tension. Yet somehow, it became another demonstration of why Serena Williams stands in a league of her own. Because the greatest victories aren't always about defeating someone else. Sometimes they're about defeating escalation, defeating ego, defeating the urge to humiliate back. Respect is fragile. Authority is powerful. Assumption is dangerous. And dignity? Dignity is unshakable when you decide it is. The cafe returned to normal. Customers came and went. The spill dried. The moment passed. But the lesson remained. Over disrespect, over ego, over humiliation, she chose composure. And in doing so, she won again.